I needed to get away. After the breakup, I just wanted somewhere quiet, somewhere I could clear my head and figure out what came next. That's how I ended up here, in this little suburban neighborhood, surrounded by perfect lawns and picket fences. It was supposed to be my escape, a fresh start. The house itself was old, but it had charm. A bit creaky, sure, but nothing I couldn't handle. Or so I thought. First few days were fine, peaceful even. I spent my time unpacking and trying to settle in. But then, little things started happening. At first, I brushed them off. A window left open that I was certain I had closed. A light flickering in the hallway, though the bulbs were brand new. It wasn't until I started hearing the footsteps at night that I realized something wasn't right. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just the house settling. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was there, watching, waiting. Footsteps started slow, almost imperceptible, but once I noticed them, I couldn't unhear them. It was always around the same time, just after midnight, soft thuds moving across the floor above me. I lived alone. There shouldn't have been anyone else there. At first I tried to convince myself it was the house, that old wooden beams creaked, or maybe it was the wind. But no matter how many excuses I came up with, the sound was too distinct, too deliberate. Then, one night, something changed. I had just turned off the lights and crawled into bed, trying to block out the creeping dread that had settled over me. The house was unusually quiet, and I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd get some sleep. That's when I heard it. A whisper. At first, I wasn't sure if I had imagined it. I froze, holding my breath, straining to listen in the darkness. Then, it came again. Faint, barely audible, but undeniably there. It was coming from inside my room. My heart started pounding as I slowly turned my head toward the closet. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of blackness peeking out from the shadows within. I knew I had closed it before going to bed. The whisper came again, this time louder, more urgent, like someone was trying to speak directly to me. I couldn't make out the words. It was just this low, garbled murmur, like someone speaking from the bottom of a well. My skin prickled with cold sweat, and every instinct screamed for me to leave, but I couldn't move. I lay there, paralyzed, staring at the crack in the closet door as the whispering continued. After what felt like hours, I forced myself to sit up, my hands trembling. "Who's there?" I croaked, my voice barely more than a whisper itself. Silence. The whispering stopped. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe I hoped it would stay quiet. But just as I thought the nightmare was over, the closet door creaked open further, revealing nothing but an oppressive darkness. The air felt thick, like something was pushing against me, watching me from that pitch-black void. I jumped out of bed, slammed the closet door shut, and ran out of the room, my pulse racing. I locked myself in the bathroom, trying to steady my breathing, telling myself it was just a dream. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The next morning, I checked the closet again. Nothing seemed out of place. No intruder, no sign of anyone having been there. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been in my room that night, something that had whispered my name from the dark. After that night, everything got worse. What started with whispers became something far more sinister. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I bought security cameras the next day. Felt like overkill, but I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. I installed them in every room, especially the bedroom. If someone or something was messing with me, I'd catch it. The first night with the cameras, I barely slept. The whispers didn't return, but there was still this heavy silence, this pressure in the air that made me feel like I wasn't alone. The next morning, I reviewed the footage, feeling ridiculous. I watched hours of nothing, empty rooms still and quiet, and then, just before 2 a.m., the screen glitched. For a second, it looked like static, but when the video cleared, I saw it. Closet door. It had opened, on its own. Slowly, like something was pushing it from inside. My stomach churned. I rewound the footage over and over, watching the door creak open inch by inch. But there was no one there. No shadow, no figure, just emptiness. The footage cut back to normal, and the door stayed open for the rest of the night. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the latch was loose, or the house had shifted. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the case. Then the symbols started appearing. It was a few days later, just after I had forced myself to start thinking maybe I was overreacting. I came home from work and found strange markings scratched into the walls near the front door. They weren't deep, but they were deliberate, almost like a series of runes or symbols I didn't recognize. The paint had been gouged, leaving jagged lines across the surface. My first instinct was to call the police, thinking someone had broken in, but nothing else in the house was touched. Nothing was stolen. I scrubbed the symbols off, but the next morning they were back. Only this time, they were in my bedroom, scratched into the wall just above my bed. I remember standing there, staring at the markings, my throat tight with fear. It was as if someone was telling me they could reach me, no matter where I was. The cameras caught nothing. The footage showed my room in darkness, undisturbed. But I knew it wasn't true. Someone or something was in the house, watching, waiting, taunting me. And then came the figure. It was late, past midnight, when I first saw it. I was walking to the kitchen for water, exhausted, trying to shake off another sleepless night. As I passed the window by the front door, I saw him, standing across the street under the street lamp. Tall, shadowy figure, just standing there, staring. At first I thought maybe it was just a neighbor. But when I looked closer, I realized something was wrong. The figure wasn't moving, not an inch. Just standing there, motionless, like a statue. I watched him for what felt like hours, waiting for him to leave or make some kind of move. But he didn't. Finally, I blinked and he was gone. No sound, no footsteps, just gone. I checked the cameras again the next morning, but of course, there was nothing. No one had been there. But I knew what I had seen. The figure was real, and I couldn't help but wonder if he was the one whispering from my closet, or if something even worse was coming. A feeling of dread wrapped around me tighter each day. I stopped sleeping, I stopped leaving the house. No matter how hard I tried to convince myself this was all in my head, something in that house was alive, and it was getting closer. Couldn't take it anymore. The whispers, the symbols, figure, it was all closing in on me. Every night felt like a countdown to something terrible. I needed answers. I needed to know what was haunting me. I started digging into the house's history. I found the listing from when I bought it, which led me to the previous owner, a man named Daniel Watts. His name had come up a few times when I first moved in, but no one seemed to know what happened to him. I assumed he'd just moved on. But now, I wasn't so sure. I searched for anything I could find on him, and eventually, I hit something. An old police report, dated about a year before I moved in. It was vague, but one thing stood out. Daniel had reported someone breaking into the house multiple times, but there were no signs of forced entry. The police found nothing, no evidence, no fingerprints. But Daniel swore someone had been inside. Most disturbing part? His words echoed my exact experience. He'd told them about whispers, about feeling watched, about someone or something moving in the shadows, just beyond sight. The final report was the worst. Daniel had filed it just days before he disappeared. In his last frantic call to the police, he mentioned a figure standing outside his house, staring at him through the windows. He described it as a whispering stranger, someone who knew every detail about his life, his secrets, his fears. He claimed the figure wasn't human. I felt sick. This was exactly what I'd been dealing with. It wasn't in my head. This thing had been here long before I arrived, and whatever it was, it had taken Daniel. Now it was coming for me. Desperate, I tried to leave the house. I threw a few things into a bag, barely able to think straight. But as I reached the front door, the air around me changed. It felt heavier, colder, like the house itself was trying to hold me in place. The doorknob wouldn't turn. I yanked at it, but it was stuck. My heart was pounding in my ears, and I turned to run for the back door, only to find it slammed shut right in front of me. That's when I heard it again, the whisper. But this time it wasn't coming from the closet. It was coming from everywhere, around me, inside my head, as if the house itself was speaking to me. You can't leave. Voice was low, distorted, but it felt like it knew me, like it had always known me. I stumbled backward, my pulse racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. The walls around me seemed to pulse, the shadows growing darker and more oppressive. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The house was closing in on me. And that's when I saw him. The figure. He was standing in the hallway, just a few feet away, his face obscured by shadow. I couldn't make out any features, just a dark, looming presence that seemed to grow taller with every passing second. "I know everything about you." That's the whisper said again, but now it was louder, clearer. It was coming from the figure. He took a step toward me, his movements slow, deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. "Your secret, your lies, your fears." The whisper was right in my ear now, even though the figure hadn't moved any closer. It was like the voice was inside me, invading my thoughts. I stumbled backward, feeling the coldness of the wall behind me. I couldn't escape. There was nowhere to go. The figure took another step, and that's when I realized the truth. This thing wasn't here to haunt me. It wasn't a ghost or a demon. It was the house. The house itself had been watching me, studying me, feeding off my fears, and now it had me exactly where it wanted me. I don't know how long I stood there, pressed against the wall, staring at that figure. Time felt warped, distorted. Seconds stretched into eternity, and with each passing moment, the realization settled deeper into my bones. There was no escape. The whispering grew louder, filling the room, filling my mind. The figure didn't move. It didn't need to. Its presence was everywhere, suffocating me, pulling me in. I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears, and beneath it, the whispering wove through my thoughts, coiling around my fear. "You are always mine," voice said, this time clear and unmistakable, as if it had always been there. It didn't sound like anyone I knew. It sounded like everyone. Like it had pulled voices from deep within my memories, twisting them into something unrecognizable. I tried to fight it, tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. My limbs were heavy, like they weren't mine anymore. And then, in the quiet of my mind, the house showed me what it had done. I saw Daniel. I saw his face, twisted with terror, as he stood in the same spot I now stood. I saw him claw at the walls, begging to be released. I saw him disappear into the shadows, swallowed whole by the house, his mind shattered by the same whisper that now consumed me. And then I saw myself. I saw the police arrive days later, finding my home empty, just as they had with Daniel. My things left untouched, cameras blinking, still recording nothing. No sign of struggle, no sign of life. Just an empty house, waiting for the next person to wander in, unsuspecting. The whispering was constant now, like 1,000 voices speaking at once. I could feel it pressing into me, sinking into my skin. The walls seemed to pulse around me, closing in, and my figure, loomed closer. I tried to scream, I tried to run, but I was frozen, trapped in place, my body no longer my own. The figure stepped closer until it was right in front of me, its presence overwhelming. It leaned down, and though I couldn't see its face, I could feel it, inches from mine, cold and suffocating. "You're part of this now," it whispered. "You always were." The darkness closed in, swallowing me whole, and in that final moment, I realized the truth. The house wasn't haunted. It was alive. It had been waiting for me, feeding off my fear, twisting my reality until there was no escape. And now I was part of it. Just like Daniel, just like all the others.